Weekends are witches.
Trying to introduce a bathroom bill on him, Dave? Come on, back up.
What?
Spellcasting and non-spellcasting.
He's already issued a bathroom bill that John's not allowed to take bathroom breaks during the podcast.
Yes.
That's actually pretty.
He actually has a guard stationed there that we call Bathroom Bill.
It's
really odd since his name's actually Joey. But
that does create a little bit of a crisis for Joey Bill, but it comes with the territory of the work, I suppose.
You know, Ben, I'd say you could be replaced, but you were, and then you came back. So that's not gonna, that's not going to work.
Replace yourself.
You better pace yourself before you replace yourself.
Heyo.
Don't worry, I'll leave tonight with plenty of room.
Welcome to the continued podcast adventures of three opinionated guys with mics and too much free time. Strong enough to stop a speeding movie rumor, more powerful than a bad comic book event, able to waste hours of time asking stupid questions to people who have better things to do. It's Dave, Ben, and John. It's Superhero Speak.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Superhero Speak, and I'm your host Dave.
And John.
Oh, is that me? And Ben? I'm Rusty.
And Zach.
No, not that Rusty.
No Rusty tonight. Did we step into a time machine, John?
Well, Zach is here, so if we did, he came with us.
Well, Zach hasn't been on in a while either, so...
We'd have to be talking about this old movie that we're talking about tonight.
Oh, that is true.
Hasselhoff.
Are you speaking of Zardu Hasselfrau? I'm not familiar with this.
No, guys, we're here to talk about The Punisher. The Netflix Marvel television series Punisher.
Awesome.
Okay.
I should watch that.
Yes, and of course, filling in for JD this evening and Matt, who both did not get a chance to watch the show. We brought in our good old friend Ben, and of course, Zach from the other side of the country, because, he didn't have anything better to do tonight.
And unlike those guys,
true.
I don't have a life from watching television.
Exactly. I was able to binge 13 hours this weekend, no problem.
I'll have you know that I was at my sister's house most of last week. I got home Sunday morning at 9:00, and the first thing I did when I came in, before unpacking or anything else, turn on this damn show and then proceed to basically chug it for the rest of the day.
So you sound like that was some sort of punishment.
I feel like he's suffering from PTSD, so...
I could have just watched Faces of Death on a loop and gotten the same result.
I wouldn't go that far.
All right. So
doing it wrong.
I wouldn't either, because I don't understand that reference. Anyways, continue.
I went to my in-laws on Thursday for Thanksgiving, but then I left reasonably early in the evening and didn't socialize with family for the rest of the weekend because this was more important.
There, see? Priorities, John. I've been telling you that. Ben has them straight sometimes.
Yes, we are thankful for Marvel, and we are not thankful for family.
So let's do what we always do. Let's go around the room, give our initial reactions to the show, try to keep it spoiler-free, and since he's our guest from the left coast, we'll start with Zach.
Well, I was a fan. I do not think it was the best Marvel Netflix show, but I think elements of it were. I think in my book, I think it had the best acting of all of the Marvel Netflix shows thus far.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, there were a few things that, little nitpicky things here and there that I didn't love, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was probably top 3 of the Marvel Netflix shows thus far.
Oh, cool. And then, of course, since he's returning from the dead, we'll have Ben's opinion next.
My joints are mostly moving. So I would have to say that, I wouldn't say that this had any plot holes per se, but there were divots. It wasn't perfect. But that said, I really enjoyed the series. If there was any major complaints I would have about it is that, I think the 13 episode arc is sometimes more than is necessary. for some of these series. I think they can fit the story into 10, or even 8 sometimes. But because there's definitely those episodes that feel like filler, and this was no exception to that. That said, I never felt bored with it or felt lost. I enjoyed the ride pretty much through to the end.
Okay. And John, you seem to have things you need to get out.
You mean besides mucus? Because I'm sitting here with I'm just warning you now. Halfway through this episode, I'm going to drink this glass of NyQuil Extreme, and then whatever happens. So this could end any way.
I say we make it a bit of a drinking game. You do a little shot of it every time someone says the word Punisher.
Okay,
Is it actually
that'll be shorter than the Stephen King drinking game.
Is it actually called NyQuil Extreme? I don't think I've ever heard of.
No, it's actually the Alka-Seltzer cold and flu, but the maximum strength, which is actually stronger than the NyQuil stuff. Trust me, I made the pharmacist give me the good stuff.
And a shot of Jaeger.
Well,
yes, exactly. That's where the extreme comes
brandy.
in.
That's over here. That's the chaser.
That's what it's congealing within.
And just in case that's not enough, I've got a Benadryl pill over here that I'll take as well. I'm sure I will be completely cogent at the end of the show. Anyway,
now will you be taking that medicine neat or on the rocks?
Well, depending on the number of pills, I guess you'd say on the rocks if you consider them the rocks. Okay, so as far as this show is concerned, I think somebody looked at it and said to themselves, "How can we make Quentin Tarantino's practical effects people feel inadequate?" And I think they cornered the market on fake blood, first off. Second off, if the Punisher doesn't have a healing factor, I'll just drink this whole thing right now. But overall, the story was good. I think the fact that they didn't just treat him as a grunt, but they treated him as a person going through extreme PTSD and gave him other aspects other than shoot and kill, shoot and kill, shoot and kill. I think they did a really good job. There are some other things that they could have done a better job with because he's supposed to be experienced, and as far as this is concerned, he's being played as a tank in a video game being controlled by a 5-year-old who thinks he's in God mode. So, but otherwise, I agree with Zach, and it's not the worst of the films. It's not the best, but it's a good installment.
Okay. I agree mostly. I'm with Ben on the. Did it need to be 13 episodes? And the real reason I feel that way is it was gruesome. I mean, and I'm sorry if that's a spoiler at this point, but we'll get into that more. So there were times it was difficult to watch for me because of how bloody and gruesome it was at times.
I must be desensitized by Game of Thrones because I really didn't think it was that bad. I actually thought the second season of Daredevil, in which Punisher was introduced, had more violence, but maybe I'm just misremembering. I remember explicitly a scene in that where he had a drill put through his foot, and I don't know that anything in this season of Punisher matched that. Yeah, no,
there was. I would say I wasn't thrown by any of it. It was easy enough to, it didn't bother me, and that stuff generally doesn't bother me too much unless it's like literally entrails falling out of someone's, stomach or something like that. But there were definitely some scenes. But there was definitely some scenes where during fight scenes where my wife had to cover her face because it was just a little bit much.
So that being said, I kind of came to a realization that, like, Jessica Jones dealt with some heavy, interesting topics. Luke Cage dealt with some heavy, interesting topics. So does The Punisher, where that actually is what made me think, maybe that's why Iron Fist sucked so much, because it really was just about Iron Fist and him trying to fit into the world, and they weren't dealing with the other topics like they were in those other series.
Which would have made Iron Fist a much better film, you're right.
Right. It was a lot of there was the whole corporate, whatever hijinks there, but there wasn't, in Iron Fist that is, but there wasn't a lot of real character development or growth
Right.
that sort of drove it. And in this, I mean, I wouldn't say that Punisher, that he necessarily had a character growth arc in this show, but at the same time, like there was this, to me, it felt like he was never presented as a hero or as, the good guy per se, so much as, he knows he's working outside of, the law and outside of what's really sanctioned and right, but he feels justified in his actions, but he knows he's wrong at the same time and doesn't really advocate anyone else following his footsteps. And, but it's all he knows how to do. So it's an interesting, he's a very gray character.
Right.
And
so let me just stop you right there because we're starting to get into spoiler territory. So of course I want to give our usual warning. Our audience, thank you. I want to give our audience our usual warning here, that if you haven't watched the show, please stop now and go and watch it if you wish, or you can continue on. But we will come back.
Everyone dies, even all of the other Marvel Netflix people, and there's no more series at all. Sorry, just kidding.
Okay,
hold on. So we're going to take a quick break to get a word from our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll be into spoiler territory. Hey, boys and girls, it's your old pal Dave to tell you about this week's sponsor, Freshly.com. Are you like me? Do you want to try to eat healthy, but there isn't always time to run out and go shopping and buy fresh ingredients, or even time to do the cooking? Well, Freshly.com has the answer for you. This is a great program for busy people who are trying to eat better. They send you prepared meals, and they're refrigerated, never frozen. Meals are ready in 3 minutes. And it's delicious food. They have a Southwest bowl that I love. Sicilian-style chicken parm, grilled chicken roasted with butternut squash, chicken rice pilaf, turkey shepherd's pie. I mean, just amazing, delicious food. And it goes on and on. All their meals are guaranteed fresh, healthy, gluten-free, and free from refined sugars. So you know you're eating right. And the best part is right now, if you use our exclusive offer, use the code SUPERHERO at checkout, you will get $40 off your first 2 orders and free shipping on every single order. That's 6 meals cooked by Freshly's chefs for only $39. And again, this food is amazing. You'll love it. I guarantee. So give them a try. Head on over to Freshly.com, order your first meals today, use the code SUPERHERO, and get your first 2 meals on us. Again, that's Freshly.com, and use the code SUPERHERO at checkout. Thanks. All right, so we are back, and as we said, we are now going to spoil the crap out of the Punisher.
Well, they spoiled the entrails out of him at one point, so yeah, okay.
So yeah, that's one of the things. Like right away, they made an interesting choice by taking his guns away from him in a lot of the scenes and making it like not just fight, like knives and cutting people up and squishing people's eyeballs into their heads. Brutal, bloody fighting scenes in this show.
And not just just scenes, but like remember when we talked about Daredevil, where it wasn't just a fight scene, it was a slog. It was hard.
Mm-hmm.
It caused pain. You had like Daredevil sitting there against the wall for a second, just trying to catch his breath. And you see that in this. It makes you feel and hear every punch, every stab. So it's very visceral.
So Zach, there was no scene in this show that made you like have to look away at all?
Actually, you mentioned, excuse me, the eye gouging, and that point just got me. I was torn because I really wanted to see that bastard get his eyes gouged out, but at the same time, it was hard to watch, and I started having flashbacks to the Mountain killing, what's his face, Oberyn. At that point, I did indeed have to turn my head. But other than that, I didn't think it was so brutal. I mean, it was certainly violent. I'm not going to argue that it was SpongeBob, but yeah, it was.
And I would say, since we're passive spoiler warning, the whole fight between Punisher and Billy Russo at the very end of the carousel had some brutal moments to it. You know, the scraping his face across the broken glass.
As he did that, I just loved it.
However,
Yes.
he.
I know what he did.
Okay, so they're setting that up for him to come back as another villain.
Right.
Jigsaw.
I found myself looking that up like a couple episodes from the end. I was like, all right, this Billy Russo character has survived through most of this. Seems like he might get away. He's got to be a Marvel character somehow. And I did end up looking him up. It's like, oh yeah, Jigsaw. And I was like, all right, so that means his face is gonna get messed up somehow.
Yeah, my wife inadvertently looked it up and slipped the name Jigsaw to me, and so the second he started scraping his face across the glass, I was like, damn it, now this guy's gonna survive, and he's gonna be the bad guy in the next season. So yeah, that was a bummer, but
he's gonna be a bad guy. Period. Doesn't necessarily mean he's gonna be the returning bad guy for the show.
True, very true.
All right, so
I'm not sure how I felt about Billy Russo as a character. I sort of felt like it was pretty telegraphed from the beginning that he was not going to be a good dude. He was just too, suave, and it was, too oily, and I don't, I was hoping somehow that I was wrong about my, suspicions that he was going to end up being a bad guy, but the fact that I was right about that was a little, I think, one of the more disappointing things for me. It didn't ruin the show for me by any stretch of the imagination, but I just wish that, I don't know, somehow they had hid that more.
Yeah, I was suspicious when he started very fervently asking around about Frank when he had any inkling that he might be still hanging around, like when he asked Curtis. But, I was sort of hoping he would be, like, obviously he ended up being connected and affiliated, but I was hoping he would still be kind of a gray character in his own right.
Yeah, he was a little too extreme. He was just too willing to kill anyone and everyone for whatever reason.
Well, I think it's that point of rationalization where, like, he was seeing this as if it's either all or nothing at the end. Like, if he doesn't, come out of this on top when it comes to Castle, then he loses everything he's worked so hard at. This whole Anvil, security thing that he has, and his money and everything just sort of falls apart like a house of cards.
Very true.
And so I could kind of see the rationalization in his head. It's like, well, I've already, skirted a good number of lines as it is just to get where I am. To hold on to this it's a kit and caboodle.
Ben, are you hiding any dark secrets? You sound to be empathizing quite a bit there. I don't know. How many people have you killed?
I'm not at liberty to disclose.
So, but I'm with Zach too, and it was funny when he first introduced him, and he comes in and he's giving the check to, what was the other character's name? The other best friend,
Curtis.
The corpsman, Curtis. Yeah, he's giving him the check, and it was just like that. That's what clicked in my head. It's like someone's being called to outer space.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Your guild is giving money to pay for this place where they're having this meeting, but you're not actually involved in helping, and like that kind of clicked in my head, like something's not right with this guy,
Yeah, he doesn't actually show up to the meetings. He's just sort of paying for this as sort of his attrition for his secret misdeeds.
Right. So I know that you didn't, Ben. I don't know. I'm pretty sure John didn't. Zach, did you read the Punisher comic at all?
I did not. No, I was sort of, I knew less about this character than any of the others going in, really. So I was pretty in the dark.
Yeah.
That said, they introduced him in season 2 of Daredevil. I mean, I was familiar with him, obviously, and I think they did such a remarkable job of introducing him in season 2 of Daredevil that kind of outshone this. I mean, I keep saying that like this somehow was bad. That's not at all the case. But I thought his introduction was just so breathtaking, and that it felt like I didn't need another origin story for him. Is what this kind of felt like. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's not that I've never read Punisher. I've never followed that comic series on its own per se, but I've read plenty of comics with him in them, such as from like the Civil War series and things like that. So I had a good blueprint in my mind of what the Punisher was about. But yeah, I haven't read like any of the major, like Punisher Max or any of the big story arcs
Right.
of the
Well, with the picture you have of him in your mind, were they true to that in this?
Well, kind of. I would say he fit that in the sense of what he was willing to do. The thing about it is it's difficult to really mirror the image I have of him from the comics, because the way I see Punisher in the comics, like he is resolved and adamant in what he does, but he does actually have his own, heroes and ideals that he looks up to. Like I remember there was a whole thing with the death of Cap the first time, that Captain America died, a couple, decade or so ago. He was one of the people who was interested in filling those boots because he idolized the Cap. But so you really can't get that across in this kind of show, because they're not really getting that deeply referential, and Cap didn't really have that kind of influence in this universe, per se. So, but at the same time, he hits all the same notes of what I've always read of Frank Castle, being as the Punisher.
Right. I was what I was going to say is, I probably read a comic here and there. I'm more familiar with him being in other stories, and I kind of felt the same thing. And I also kind of thought about that too, going in to this show. I mean, we already know that they released it later than they originally were going to because of the Las Vegas shooting.
Yeah.
And in today's world, with everything so overly heightened and people being afraid and whatnot, it was like, how are they going to approach this character and have him in a way that people are just not going to hate the show completely, Yeah. And I kind of feel like, I don't know who said it at the beginning, but you guys were just saying it too, he's kind of gray on the show, and he's really kind of just like the tank that's sent out to do all the destruction and the violence. Micro's really the guy pointing where to go.
Sure, but I will say to that, I feel like I think they did right by how they've orchestrated this story, because I feel like, so his origin story is always about him getting back at those who hurt his family,
right.
And we sort of already saw that play out via Daredevil season 2 and the opening montage to this show. When he's going around basically killing off all of the parties involved in the shooting that happened at the carousel. And in the comics, he's a great character, but he's essentially hunting out, he's basically seeking out, people to punish that, that don't always have anything to do with him. And this story still fit and related to him. It still affected his,
right.
Whereas they weren't the people that pulled the trigger. They're the people that were the reason that the triggers were pulled, and there was a level that he didn't realize he hadn't, cleaned house deep enough. And so the fact that they were able to make it personal and important to him, and not him just carrying out, Micro's mission per se, it wasn't just about Micro. It was still about him. I think kept it from being, detached and shallow. I think it was still was able to have depth.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that too was compounded by the substantive nature of, the whole PTSD exploration and everything that we saw, the toll it took on so many different characters in the show, and how they really took that seriously. I mean, I feel like I've done a poor job so far of saying how much I appreciated the show, because I actually really did like it, and I thought it did a lot of things really well, many more things than it did poorly. So, yes, that point, the personal nature of his experience, coupled with the PTSD for him and other characters, really made this, as John put it, a visceral show, although he was referring to the violent scenes, which were also visceral. But yes,
visceral.
Yes, it's both figuratively and literally visceral.
Yes.
Right. No, but again, I like how they teamed him up with Micro. It's like, here's a guy who had more information into what happened and thus forced Frank to go deeper, helping both of them out in the long run.
Yeah, that was great. Their dynamic was fantastic. But go ahead.
But by the end of the show, and we're jumping around here, I know a lot. By the end of the show, it was kind of like, well, then that's all resolved, and you're like, well, is he still going to be the Punisher after this,
Right, and I think they addressed that really well with how they closed out the show. Like within the last episode, he skips out on Thanksgiving dinner to go to be with Curtis's group for the first time, for real, and basically says that, while he's been doing all this stuff and justifying it, the truth is now that he doesn't have any of this to do, he's scared.
Right.
And I think that's a really smart way to end that, because it basically says, it shows that he's not doing this because he's trying to be some sort of hero. He's doing it because it's all he knows how to do.
Right.
It's a muscle that he can't help but flex and doesn't know what to do when he's not flexing it. And so it does sort of leave it open-ended as to, will there be more of this really? But at the same time, it's like, it'd also be fine if there wasn't. If this was his growth, his catharsis to finally move on and have a semi-normal life.
Right. I mean, I also thought it was weird that, like, he was forgiven of everything at the end. It was like, I don't see our government doing that.
It's convenient. But, I mean, it doesn't seem likely. It seems like a rare thing, but you know what? I'll take it. I'm not really concerned about that part. But at the same time, I kind of think, ironically, to my joke intro in the beginning of the episode, is if they do a second season of Punisher, it's basically going to be like The Godfather 2, where, he's not being pulled back into this stuff because he wants to, but because he has to.
Right. All right, so let's do one of the things we kind of been doing with our review episodes is talk about each character a little bit individually, and the actor, and of course we can start with Frank Castle, the Punisher, played by John Barenthal, again reprising his role from Daredevil. I like him. Like I said it before, I think was a great choice for the Punisher. You believe him as a Marine, like he's very good at coming across as this cold-hearted, killing machine. I guess that's not a good thing, huh? To be good at that.
He was also very good at breaking bricks as Pete Castiglione.
Yes,
very true.
I think John passed out.
It seems like it. Go ahead, John. What do you think of him?
Well, as an actor, I think did he have himself beat up just so that his face would look the part? Because no, seriously, I mean, you always expect the leading man to be the dashing, elegant, face man type thing, and they picked a guy who really looks the part and was also able to get across the inner conflict, and that thing he does where he's not really looking anybody in the eye, where we're talking to him and he's like looking away because he's uncomfortable making eye contact with everybody. It's perfect. I mean, he the character perfectly.
Right, you get a sense that he's just uncomfortable with people, and I think a lot of it has to do with those inner feelings of his own of just like anger and shame, and fear that just, well, not so much fear, I guess, that he just doesn't feel like he can relate to people, and look them in the eye because. Yeah,
it's like that manic rage is just always right there. And that's really conveyed in that, as you say, it not looking people in the eye, and it's almost uncomfortable to look at him as the viewer, but in a good way, he just looks like he's going to snap at any second, all the time.
Yeah. And the only time he looks people in the eye is when he's got a gun and then he's aiming at them. That's basically, and you go through the series, and that's basically it. I mean, they managed to do that in almost every scene, and it's pretty cool. Now, as far as the Punisher is concerned, the portrayal of the character itself, I don't think they made him as smart as he should have been. Now, yeah, he was a grunt, but he was so, good at what he did, and he walked right into a whole bunch of ambushes. I mean, he should have been a hell of a lot smarter on a lot of this. And you see in a lot of the action scenes where he goes for that second or third punch on a guy who was already down, only to get shot or stabbed or basically maligned upon from a guy behind him, when, if he were that good, the guy front of him go down, the first thing you do is turn around and get ready for the next hit. So
I don't know. I thought he was good. I
Yeah,
thought in
and I
that
thought
respect,
he-
like for instance, not tripping knowing where to look for the traps when he went to visit his friend in the woods. In setting up for that final battle in the power plant. With
Yeah.
the gunpowder light bulb and the spare guns when he knew he was going to run out of ammo. Like that's preparation. That's being ready for. And like these many situations where he was going in all alone against dozens of guards, in many cases trying not to kill people, and managing to always have an escape plan, like with the hotel, with the compound where he tried to snipe Agent Orange. Like in all those cases, they showed degrees of skill and planning, and ability to read situations that were, I think, fitting the character.
Well, that's just it. I expected to see more of that. I mean, I don't expect him to go complete A-team in every scene, but still, it just seemed like it just seemed like he was taking more hits than he should have. And there's also the fact that I know in the Marvel universe, I guess at one point they said just about anybody who's quote unquote a hero has some small level of healing factor, if I remember correctly. But I just
in the comic. Sure.
That would actually ruin his character for me if that were the case. I don't believe that to be the case, and I know like it's not actually realistic that he just keeps getting up from all this. But actually, that's one of the things I love most about his character is that he's just so driven by that blind rage and anger and determination that despite shards of glass sticking out of his arms and 8 gunshot wounds, he's still fighting. It's what makes him so remarkable when you're watching, and how it just every single time he gets shot, you just cheer for him more.
Yeah, I just want to say though that in real life, like any one of the shots he took could have put a person down permanently.
Of course.
I just he.
But this is
By
Frank
the end of
Castle.
this, yeah, I know, but again, he shouldn't have had to take that many shots. I can see him getting beat up by the end of the series, which he was, but to the extent, I mean, they wanted to make it realistic, but by midway through, he's already taken like 3 bullets to his chest and a stab wound and a cut across the head. I mean, it's like at that point, he shouldn't be able to get up just from blood loss. I mean, if you want to make it a little more realistic, make him smarter about it so he's avoiding some of these things. And by the end, yeah, he could still be a wreck, but don't make him the Walking Dead.
Well,
he's a sheer force of will.
Right. I think the problem is you're treating him like he is a superhero, and he's not. He's a Marine, and he's going up in a lot of these cases. He's going up against other Marines. Marines that he's fought alongside,
right, but
who are trained just as well as him, in some cases younger because they're newer recruits. So I don't expect him to be the master of every of those situations. He's not inhuman, and I don't expect him to be. And
right, but you just made my argument for me. He's not a hero.
Right, and I think that's a good thing.
I mean, okay, that's nitpicking possibly, but again, his portrayal was perfect. The inner turmoil that they gave his character is, what made the show. And I hope at some point he meets Danny Rand and beats some sense into him.
So I will support John's statement a little bit. And it's all revolving around the stairwell senator hotel scene. Number one, when he's like running away in the hallway, he does get shot in the back.
Yeah.
And it's like
in the same shoulder that he was injured in before.
Right. And like it doesn't really slow him down, and it's like, well, at that moment, and it's like,
well,
he
was wearing a flak jacket.
He was wearing. Yeah.
Yes,
he
was.
I don't
but
remember.
In real life, all that does is make you get incredibly bruised, and people don't normally get up from even a shot with a flak jacket.
But he got shot once in the front of the jacket, or twice maybe, and he got a bunch of shots from a semi-automatic in the back of the flak jacket, and you saw him almost keel over forward from the shots in the back. But it didn't knock him down all the way because he had forward momentum because he was running.
But and then I thought the worst one was, and okay, yes, he's a Marine and he's a tough guy, but you get shot and it takes a good inch of your skin off in the head, you're not going to just stand there like, yeah.
But I think you have to view him as more than just a Marine. He's not just a Marine. He's the Punisher. Like he's the one man who is so driven by his hate and need to kill these people that he believes he needs to kill that there's literally nothing that can stop him other than death or paralysis.
I mean, similarly, Billy Russo was self-treating just as bad of injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. I mean, I guess too, like with at the end too, like when he's beaten to a bloody pulp by Agent Orange. Like, you could argue, how could he get up from that? But he shot him with adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because he wanted him to be awake.
Yeah, he didn't have a choice at that point to be up and beating the shit out of something.
Right. So yeah, that was a stupid move on his part. So let's move on to Eben Moss.
Micro?
Yeah.
Daniel Lieberman?
Yeah, Daniel Lieberman, no, but it's Moss Backrach?
Bach? I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
We're talking
Burt
about
Bacharach was in the movie?
Yeah, Burt Bacharach.
Eben Moss Bacharach, okay?
He didn't sing as much as he normally does. Micro. We're talking about Micro.
He was a character I think that was possibly most changed from the comic book. Obviously starting with the quick little difference. In the comic book, his nickname or his code name is Microchip, and in this it's just Micro, which I didn't quite understand why they changed it, because Microchip versus Micro just becomes an insult to most men.
Well, they did address that by him explicitly telling us he's hung like a moose. So.
Right.
And being Jewish too, I mean, he's kind of my hero now because we apparently have a stereotype against us. So yes, Daniel Lieberman 2020.
So it's an inside joke, and it makes him sound more street. So there you go.
Yeah, I just read it as, it was a username he used for his, NSA access for whatever reason. Honestly, at that point, it didn't matter if it was microchip or, cheese doodles. So.
Damn it, they really missed a golden opportunity there. He should have been cheese.
It could have been product placement as well.
But of course, in the comic, he's not a family man who, that's not the story from the comic. That was his involvement and all was created for the show.
Maybe that's why they changed his name from Microchip to Micro to allude to the fact that he is essentially based on this character, but he's not.
They're taking artistic liberties.
Right.
Yeah.
Making him family man / stalker.
So I actually found myself, I think, relating to him the most in the show.
More than the Punisher?
Yeah, a little more than the Punisher.
Makes sense.
I assume that was intentional. I think that he was meant to be, the displaced everyman, so to speak, that we're supposed to relate to.
Though Mythbusters did disprove that you could be saved by a cell phone.
This is true.
He was working for the NSA. You don't think he's got those, super OtterBox cases on his cell phone?
Oh, that's true. It's true. I didn't think of that.
Hey, my Droid Razor Max had Kevlar in the back of it.
See?
I mean,
they had a Kevlar phone case.
At least a half a millimeter of it, so it obviously could stop a hollow-tipped point bullet.
So,
I'm sure.
So not to get off Micro too much real quick, but what was the deal with the cell phones in this show? Why were there so many flip phones? Like, I didn't even think you could still get a flip phone.
That's first of all, that's seems to be a TV precedent that burner phones, are always seem to be flip phones, and you can actually get them. Like, if you were to get the kind of phone that would be a burner phone, basically a pay-as-you-go, or prepaid phone, a lot of those are like cheap-ass flip phones and things like that. You're not getting
They do have pay-as-you-go smartphones now, though.
Yes, and they cost more money.
I hope someone alters that trope by making it like 1980 cell phone. Just like this big, their burner phones are like 8 pounds. Oh, that would be fantastic.
Like it would be unrealistic for them to have an array of burner phones that are all like iPhone 6s. Like, that would just be gratuitously, wasteful spending.
Just have all their burner phones be the old Blackberries.
See, I would take that.
It seems overly complicated. Basically, the only thing
Punisher using his little BlackBerry pencil.
It's not like they're web browsers playing Angry Birds on these things. They're just, using them to text or send phone calls back and forth. That's it. Or locations.
But have you ever tried to text on an old style flip phone?
And that's why I don't recommend it. But
Okay, I think we've killed that one.
Okay. So
we killed the phone as a character.
So if the phone was killed, he fell in the river, and he spied on his family for a year.
Wait.
So he was Jason Bourne, basically.
Well, I think the Punisher was Jason Bourne, essentially, in this movie. You know, he had some very Jason Bourne moments.
So
Okay.
The only thing
I liked.
Okay.
So back to Lieberman. I was a big fan of Lieberman, and more specifically, I was a big fan of their dynamic. I thought, that Lieberman there really did a great job of sort of cementing or keeping Punisher. Why can't I remember his actual Frank Castle on Earth, grounding him as much as could be done with him, and it was almost like a necessary foil for him, and it was just such a great dichotomy between the two.
And I really appreciated their dynamic in you didn't see them, like, it's not like Micro reached out to Frank and all of a sudden they're on board with each other. Like, there was a whole semi-brutal vetting process that each of them did with each other to make sure that, there was going to be trust there and they were going to be on the same page. And I appreciated that. And furthermore, the fact that, like, they didn't necessarily, like, they went against each other in some of the things they were doing. Like, David went out and met with Madani, and other people, talked to people when Castle told him not to, and things like that. They had tiff about it. It wasn't just like, no big deal, everything was fine, I forgive you. It was like, I told you not to do that. You're screwing everything up, kind of confrontation.
Yeah, it was tenuous and strained the whole time, and yet you could still see the bond sort of organically growing, and I thought it was just perfectly done.
Yeah,
I thought the whole timer thing in the beginning, and I got to do a retinal scan.
That was brilliant.
And
I think that was brilliant.
It was, and it was like, because the whole thing was like when he poked him with the pen, and it had tranquilizer or something in it, and he falls asleep. At first I was like, why did he wait so long to do that? And then when he's talking about, routine, and he lulls him into a false sense of security so he slips up, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Like, it was showing that, he tried to think 10 steps ahead of everyone else.
Right. Well, and it showed a vigilance that he was willing to go through. It was like, all right, here's something I can do to get the upper hand. But to do it right, I know better that I'm not going to try to stab him the very first time I do this. I'm gonna go through this a few times and get him to drop his guard a bit because it's becomes routine, and that's when I can strike.
But to have to be tied naked to a chair for a couple of days.
Yeah, that's got to be I mean, it doesn't seem like he has much to be embarrassed about from what he said.
No, he wanted to show off his moose knuckle. That was.
But exactly. I mean, that's a typical weekend for Zach, right?
How have you gotten into my secret tapes, Dave? Did someone leak those?
Oh, John sent them to me.
Oh, well, those were for you, John.
You should know better. All right, so you want to go on to somebody else because we got a lot more people to go through apparently.
We do. Well, we can talk about the Liebermans collectively as a family. I thought that was an interesting plot arc, like the whole Frank going as Pete to integrate a bit with them and get to know them better, and ending up like sort of becoming the new family friend / guy that she's sort of starting to get to like a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure if they were going to go there or not, and obviously they did. But it is what it is.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, though. I mean, or like it's not unrealistic. She had been alone.
You're right. It was realistic. Yeah. It feels slightly cliche to me.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I
granted, this is a very odd situation, but I think I'm in completely different context where there's a mistaken identity type thing. That's always what happens.
I think you're right. No, I agree with that, but I think it's more believable in her situation where her husband's been dead for years.
Oh,
she's got 2 kids on her own. It's if it was just like it was his girlfriend and he's been watching her for a year, it'd be like she probably would have moved on.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it was a risk to think that she would still be single that long anyway.
Right.
I mean, clearly she was still sort of reeling from it and wasn't fully over it. And it was one of the things that, like, as soon as they started down that road of him getting acquainted with them, it was in the back of my mind, is there going to be a moment where they, go a step further with that whole relationship?
Especially with the cameras on.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But I honestly, like, I actually liked it because I liked how Lieberman handled it. Is it
Yeah.
Daniel or David? I keep forgetting his first name.
David.
I think
David.
it's David.
It is David. Okay. I really liked how he handled it because I kind of expected him to lose it, but yet he was,
He was on that edge. Like, he was not happy with the situation, but he didn't really blame anyone for it.
Exactly. And I thought that
seemed
just
realistic.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, and it went so far to show just the true strength of his character, too, that I think the whole thing was kind of worth it in the end.
I mean, the hardest part was that he really missed sex.
Yes, that was very hard for him, I'm sure.
Oh my God. Yeah, I didn't know where they were going with that scene. I'm glad he passed out.
So, moving on.
So what other? So we want to talk about Madani?
Yeah, let's talk about Donna.
Amber Rose Reva.
Yeah, Amber Rose Reva playing
Dinah Madani.
Donna Madani.
Dinah Madani.
That's what I said.
I think that was a Beatles song, wasn't it?
Alliteration.
Dinah Madani. Okay.
Anyway, moving on.
So she is the Department of Homeland Security agent who Micro sent the original recording to, and she's trying to solve the case.
Killed. Yeah. Right, and also trying to solve the whole, case of the video from the video, the video itself, and who was involved, all these masked men, only to ultimately find out that the guy she's allied with was the guy who pulled the trigger.
Well, not just allied.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that was an interesting arc for that because, clearly he knew about that video early on. Frank Castle did. He knew what he was exposing by going through all this, knowing that he was the guy in not only the guy in the room who could bear witness to say, yeah, I was there and these are the guys who were there. It's like, but yeah, I was also the guy who pulled the trigger. He knew that was potentially going to come out in the end, and it didn't make him reluctant to be the Punisher and do what he needed to do.
Right.
And I found the whole scene midway through or whatever with when they stole the guns and they had that weird chicken game scene where Madonna gets sideswiped and Castle ends up rescuing her. For one, it was good to see them not afraid to have a major female character get just as beat up as anyone else and still have that determination to move, to move on and keep fighting. But it also sort of left me wondering, like, so yeah, she gets sideswiped by the truck. I want to know what would have happened if that didn't happen. Like, what was the end game in Castle's mind?
Who would win, the new Mustang or the classic Mustang?
Right. Like, I want to know what that alternate version of that scene would have been. Like, how he planned on resolving that situation.
Oh, come on, you saw the look in his eye. He was just going to go right through that car.
He was thinking, I have airbags and she doesn't.
I don't know. I think it probably was some sort of other end game he had in mind. Maybe he knew his turning radius was better than hers or something and could basically get to that cross street before she would and turn off and make a run for it. I don't know.
Maybe a healing factor?
Oh, man.
He was just planning on catapulting through the windshield and walking away.
I get what you're saying. Like, I have no idea what he was he even thinking, though? Was it just a...
Well, what was Madani thinking, too?
Right.
That's the whole thing, is it kind of felt like it was just a macho contest.
Yeah.
Which is nice considering it, a woman getting into a macho contest and, she's...
I just feel like it's Frank Castle. If he's as, forward thinking as we think him to be, like, I would imagine he had a strategy there. He had an exit move an end game to that situation, but we never were told what it was. So that's sort of, it's just one of those things that's stuck in my craw now, and it'll bother me.
I wonder too if it was more about both of their psyches and the fact that they were just she was haunted by Zubair, so she was not as broken as Frank Castle, but was in some ways broken too, and maybe was just looking for an out, and so they were just gonna play chicken to the end. Who knows?
I'm going to pretend you didn't have that name in front of you and commend you for coming up with it.
I actually don't. Thank you very much.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I think it was showing her stubbornness, though, too. Like, she's willing to do whatever it takes to get her man,
Yeah, this is true.
Which is another cliche.
I guess so.
But her drive is also, it is more, what am I trying to say here? It's driven by more than just, a sense of duty. There is a psychology behind it that is, somewhat fractured at that point already.
Yeah, and as driven as she is, I wouldn't call her a flat character necessarily.
No, not at all.
She definitely had dimension to her.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm on the Wikipedia site, and I just read something very interesting. So, in the gunfight at the warehouse that she tricks Billy's team into, where they think Castle's going to be there,
the ruse, yeah,
and she's using the shotgun. That was a specially designed prop shotgun that was made smaller because of her short stature.
Interesting.
Well,
this is true. I mean, if they sawed off a shotgun to fit her size, they'd take it off at the trigger.
Well, I mean, she could have just had a couple of handguns.
To be fair, John Bernthal isn't winning any height contests. He's quite a diminutive man, which they did a decent job of hiding, but they can only do so much.
True.
Why? How tall is he?
He looks like he's no taller than 5'8", which, for someone speaking at 5'7 3/4", he's a freaking giant, but still, he's not towering over it.
I love how you have that measurement to the 3/4 inch.
That 3/4 is very important, my friend. I never forget it.
Hey, if I concentrate, I'm 5'8", so.
Yeah. Well, you're all taller than me anyway. Actually, I wanted to go back for a second. A quick bug that bothered me with the Lieberman family. So there was this where it came out towards the end that Frank Castle was alive, and and it was all over the news, right? My wife brought up this question, and I think it was a valid question. That's not the first time Frank Castle has been plastered all over the news. His trial was very, a big deal, and his escape from prison was a big deal. Like, all of that stuff, was very much in the public eye, and probably happened around this, a time maybe, when all this went down. But the point is, like a year ago or whatever, the point is like, why didn't David's wife recognize him sooner, especially once he clean-shaved himself and got the hair.
Maybe that's it, too. Like, you can explain away by saying he was, the bearded...
the scruffy-looking...
...burly man, and that hit it. And then once he shaved it off, maybe she knew him as this persona already, and so didn't think to...
I guess.
It's a stretch. You're right.
Yeah. I think I can answer that in two parts. Number one, a year ago, when he was plastered all over the news and all that craziness was going on, she was dealing with the death of her husband. So probably wasn't paying attention to the news.
Point to you.
Possibly, but we're rationalizing the situation. We don't know for certain that that's how the timeline arranges.
Well, you're trying to say, why not? I'm giving you a why not. Two, it goes back to our favorite book series collectively, the Dresden Files, where people.
Sorry, Zach.
Besides Zach, yes, I know his
is better than mine. I understand.
His is the Heir of Olympus. We know. The plausible, not plausible deniability. What's the thing I'm looking for? Like, you'll change things in your head. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a year ago she saw the picture, so she's going in there. So first she's like, "Is it him?" Nah, it's not sure. He's dead.
Right.
So
exactly. That's
the mind will make up the narrative that it's comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah, it was widely believed that he was dead too. So there is.
Right. So this is just the nice neighbor who's helping me out with my garage. He's not a murderer.
Who doesn't seem to live anywhere particular and is always accessible. And initially looks like a homeless person.
Yes. When No, we don't need no further
Yeah, I
explanation.
mean, we can all agree her judgment might have been a little off, but
Potentially.
she can explain it.
She thought he was cute. All right, come on.
So
into the
really
scruffy
off.
look.
So,
She's into the scruffy look, which is why she welcomed David back so readily
Exactly.
hey,
after his
if
year in exile.
if you're into people whose face looks like roadkill, then fine, that's
He-
great.
Well, David had the beards in the flashbacks too, so
So
Yeah, I
hairy
guess so.
roadkill.
so we got
Well,
all.
no,
She's
about the
always,
family.
she's always been into the scruffy look.
Yeah, and the Liebermans, I mean, Zach, the bitter irony is that the kid Zach was like my least favorite character. He was so messed up. I hated that kid.
Yeah.
Like, from the get-go. And I couldn't, I understand why he was messed up, but, why did his name have to be Zach?
But I did like the turn though they made with him. The fact that he was being such an asshole for so much of the scenery he was in, and when Frank confronts him with a knife, it comes out that like he's not being a bully and a dick. He's actually scared and alone and
Right.
fragile, and
Very
that's
true.
and that they were able to make that pivot. And keep him from being so flat and stereotypical. I really enjoyed that.
Good point. I just had trouble seeing past his sullying of my name, but you're right. You're right.
So I think that the kid, in a way, was a reflection a little bit of Frank. Because he was lashing out because he was afraid and whatnot. And again, it all goes back to
I see the parallels.
the overarching theme of the whole show of people dealing with PTSD. And it's like he was dealing with the stress and the trauma of losing his father and, lashing out. So it's, it's all a circle, guys.
It's all connected.
It's
All right,
connected.
you're right. I think
So
we can all agree Zach was the best character.
Yeah. All right, so
Hands down.
moving along. I guess we all think that Madani was good, and and just a ball full of rage and regret.
So there's something else I wanted to touch on since we're talking about Madani, and it's something else with this series. Like, okay, so they took away his guns and made him more brutal and bloody. But they also kind of pushed the envelope sexually with the little bit of sex scenes that were in this show than they have in the past.
There were definitely some very close calls, so to speak, as far as revealing skin and whatnot.
Right, more so than the past shows. And I was like, are they going to slowly just transition this into softcore porn? Like, what's going on here?
A, I don't think I'm necessarily against that. But B, I think that I think they knew their audience. I think they knew that they were catering to, they knew the violence inherent in this series was going to be at a level that this is not going to be accessible to, the younger teen set. This is more closer to the R than it is the G-13. And that being said, then why not, push those envelopes a little further? But, it's also a testament to they've gotten really good at, the quote-unquote technology of, like, the stickers that they put in all the right places to keep there from being a potential nip slip or whatever.
Right.
Those scenes. So why not, allow that skin? Because, there's a chicken cutlet covering all the important things.
I mean, we had to see, we got Russo's butt as he was walking into the bathroom.
And I assume you watched that in slow motion a couple times?
Just 3. I mean,
They really need to add a zoom feature to Netflix. That's all I'm saying.
All right. So it looks like I'm going to be the referee here. So moving along again. There's a lot of things to talk about, but I guess one of the things we can talk about is we got in this one we got Karen Page. We didn't get what's her name, the nurse.
No night nurse. No Claire Temple.
Yeah, no Claire Temple.
When
but
she was most needed.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that makes sense that we didn't get Claire, because Claire never really had an attachment or connection to him specifically. Karen does have a connection to him, and was connected to him in Daredevil season 2, and helping him figure out, the connections, figure out who we need to be going after, and figure out his background in the story. Claire wasn't really involved in that. So it wouldn't make sense for him to reach out to Claire.
True.
And it wouldn't really make sense for her to be a part of this story.
I mean, the reason she technically wasn't was because there was a scheduling conflict and she couldn't. But on the other hand, who plays Claire? Damn it, I can't.
Rosario Dawson.
How I keep saying her, I don't know. But
anyone forgets her.
She also mentioned in an interview that she said that it almost wouldn't make sense for a character to be in there because she would be very against what Frank was doing. They were like polar opposites as far as morality was concerned. I mean, she had to.
Did they ever even meet in the second season of Daredevil?
I don't think they did. That's why I said
I didn't think so.
It wouldn't really fit.
Right.
So yeah, I think they were right in the relationships they did maintain. The fact that basically Karen was the only other carryover from those shows makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And her role, I thought, was perfect. I didn't have any problems.
It was the best use of Karen yet.
It was like she wasn't so doting and mourning as she was with Matt Murdock, which makes sense because she doesn't have the same attachment to Frank that she had to Matt. She was playing the part of the reporter. She was being the concerned friend and
I don't think she's just a friend with him now. I mean, I think
there's a little more than that
there is, but at the same time, their relationship has always been different. She expects Frank to be a certain way in a way that she never really accepted with Matt.
Makes sense. Yep.
True. I also kind of think her being a reporter. See, this is the thing.
Yeah,
too.
no, I'm with you there. I got over it, but yeah, when she walked into the newspaper and decided that she was going to be a reporter back in Daredevil season 2 or whatever, that was preposterous. Yeah,
right.
But at this point, I've accepted.
But at the same time, it's like a reporter makes more sense to fit into all the other series than have a nurse just happen to show up when a nurse is needed in all the other series.
Oh, someone needs to be sewn up? Here I am.
Right. So
you have superpowers
they didn't need her. They had a field medic. So they had that covered. Curtis is a good field medic.
By the way. He had a rough go of things.
He did. I mean, there was definitely some times where there was close calls, and like I remember the scene with Lewis, beating him with his own leg. My wife was like covering her eyes, like, no, not Curtis. They can't kill Curtis.
Yes. Yep. Same here.
Yeah. Because
okay, good.
I was just saying, he was if anyone was a good guy in the show, it was him. Like he was. He was the only one who came out of the events over in Kandahar and whatnot, without being completely jaded, without being broken to the extent. I mean, obviously he was physically broken, but he wasn't emotionally broken the way that both Frank Castle and Billy Russo were, in that they had either were messed up or completely detached from it. That he was able to hold on to his humanity and do something good with his life and basically be the light that this show needed to keep it from being a complete downer fest.
I knew when they didn't kill him with his own leg that he was going to make it to the end. I just had that feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
It's gonna pull through.
Yes. Lewis, by the way. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
No. I was about to talk about Lewis. That's just it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. As abhorrent as he was really well played. I don't know the name of the actor, but like a remarkable job of just terrifying the hell out of anyone.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Daniel Weber.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I don't know enough about PTSD to know. So I don't want to sound ignorant, but I can imagine that is very well depicted there. And I thought that was one of the – initially I didn't really like his character arc because I didn't really know where it was going.
Yeah, I didn't know where it was going either, and it seemed like it was kind of vestigial.
Yes.
I did appreciate that it finally came together and connected in some way. But at the same time, if they were to cut this down to a shorter – series, that would definitely, I think, be one of the stories that fell on the cutting room. Because I think they could excise that without hurting the overarching story.
They could, but I think it also just makes Frank Castle's character a little bit more relatable or a little bit more understandable, that he's not exactly the same. Like it just does a little bit more to cut to the core of Frank and really understand what drives him.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And
You're saying they basically used it as a contrast to frame his character better.
Right. And I think it's basically showing that, like, basically Lewis and Russo were essentially examples of directions that Frank could have gone if he allowed himself to, but avoided because, he kept a better head about himself and kept a set of standards to himself. So, yeah, I agree. I was just gonna say I agree.
The only thing was the scene in the restaurant or the kitchen at the end, and it was like, Frank's telling Karen, "Oh, yeah, you did a good job when you told me to cut that white wire," and it happened to be a white wire on his kill switch.
That was a presumptuous move. That was definitely a presumptuous move.
Well, no, it wasn't, because all bombers have a signature. You don't get a bomber that. No, seriously, when the guy's making a bomb.
But this was just a kid who was just decided to make bombs. This wasn't a professional bomb maker.
Well, yeah, but he was trained he was trained. I mean,
yeah, and I do agree. It does. Usually, it would be really dumb for any bomb maker to not follow wiring patterns,
right?
Because
exactly.
it makes
he knows
because it'll make it confusing. If you make multiple bombs, I'm sure he went through a process of making most of these bombs before he actually started using them. So it's as it is, he's naturally going to follow a pattern. Otherwise, he's going to blow himself up by accident.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that I am surprised that he didn't pick up on what the messaging that Frank was trying to pass along. Because he was not very discreet about it.
He was pretty unstable, Lewis. That's
true. I mean, he was addressing Lewis, so Lewis was taking the message that he was supposed to be taking from it, rather than the message that Frank was telegraphing to Karen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not noticing his head move somehow. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that pretty much. I mean, yeah. Anybody else have anything to say on that?
I will say the only part that the reason I thought that scene was important is because I was wondering up until I saw that scene why Karen's face was scratched up when she was talking about what happened.
Oh yeah.
I was like, all right, that's why her face is scratched up.
Well, they did that one episode that was all out of order, which usually
that's the same episode.
Yeah. It's just it, and those can be neat because you get to see you get to wonder for most of the episode how the hell things ended up that way, and they did a really good job on that, I think.
Agreed.
Do we want to open up the can of worms and beat them till they're dead horses?
Which can of worms are you most concerned about opening up right now?
The way they framed the gun debate.
Well, I did find it interesting that they addressed it. I don't think they ever really sided on the debates per se. They basically presented both cases and didn't really present either of them as better than the other.
Right.
My only call on it, and feel free to pile on me for this, was that right now the debate is technically between the Second Amendment people who just everybody should have 80 guns, and the other side, which is by and large people who believe that we should be restricting, the semi-automatics, and we should have better background checks.
Yeah.
And most of regulations of which they're trying to push forward are supported by even most of the people who are members of the NRA.
Sure.
But in this, they seem to portray the one gun control guy as I just want to take all guns away from some people, which is not really a popular position even on the gun control side.
Well, no, I think his mantra was I want to take all guns away from certain people, and I don't want to take
which is a mantra that's going on. Like
people.
keep people who have a history of mental health or a history of domestic abuse from having guns.
Right.
Fit his platform, and that is a message that's being broadcast.
Right,
he just didn't present it cogently. That's part of the, I think the only flaw there is that who was a senator or whatever he was, he did not present his arguments very cogently. I think is the only flaw in how they presented the debate.
Well, it wasn't just that, they also portrayed him as A, a coward, and B, during that episode, him looking around at the resultant carnage and saying, wow, this makes you really think about things. It's like...
Yeah. And it's a show about guns, so it's going to be hard for them to come down against guns when their main character is essentially the biggest lover of guns.
Well,
I mean,
I understand. It's just it seemed like there were a few nudges towards one direction rather than the other. Again, this is only a can of works.
The 90s boy band is always a bad one, but
we can all agree on.
Yes, but I would say, whereas I tend to be on the side of more gun control. I'm not an NRA fan per se, and I don't own a gun. I had no problem with the messaging in this show because I think the show knows what it is.
Yeah, and they didn't, as far as I know, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. First off, we were at the New York Comic Con, and they put off screening. Was it a pre-screen of this because of that?
It was going to be.
It was more than that. They were actually going to release the show as a surprise that weekend. Like they were going to be like, surprise, it's on Netflix now, and they completely pushed it out till November because of that.
Yeah, it's a wise move.
Yeah.
They didn't change anything because of that, though, right? I mean, they didn't shoot anything or cut anything out. They just put it off.
Right.
So, I'm trying to. I want to put a lid back on the can, but
Snake's already popped out of it.
I know. So
there you go.
I did find it interesting that they brought in the anti-gun, or senator after a bomb went off, and it's like, well, wait a minute, what does a bomb have to do with gun debates? So it was a little weird how they framed it. I thought, like they could have brought him in earlier and talked about a terrorist like Frank Castle running around with guns. Would have made, to me, more sense.
Sure, but there wouldn't have been a reason to bring that in conversationally into the show at that point. Like, I see what you're saying, and he probably was broadcasting those messages even before that, the bombing. It's just the bombing gave him a platform to be on the radio more.
Yeah, and that actually, the point you just made, Dave, was remarked upon in the show. People were saying, their counter argument
was a bomb, not a gun. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So that was brought up, but I still think it's a relevant debate, in general within the context of the show.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So now that we've beaten that pretty good,
it's like a pachyderm that serves no purpose. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I don't know. But
one of the things I kind of really did like about the show, they must have talked to a lot of military people. Like I didn't serve in the military. I know none of the three of you did either, but I have a lot of friends and family that have.
You don't know my life. But you're right.
Dark past.
And it's like, I really appreciate it. There were just like little things. One of the most important ones that plus popped in my head because you guys said gun debate is Frank Castle would never say the word gun. He called it his weapon. Somebody in the military wouldn't say the word gun. They would say their weapon. So It was like little things like that I noticed throughout the show. And I'm like, wow, the writers really did their homework on this, on those aspects.
Well, it's not that hard to find military people to consult with, per se.
Well,
we make a lot of them.
Yes, we do.
Especially
for a show.
Yeah, especially for a show that wants to portray PTSD and all the things that the veterans are going through. I mean, I'm sure they had a line of people that wanted to consult on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same. They just went to the line that's at the VA and talked to all those people. So anyway,
I actually find it funny that really the big villain in this movie was the military industrial complex, and that sort of gets overshadowed.
This is true.
Well, yes and no, because they it's the whole. Oh no, you're right. It's just like, oh, but it was off books and it was
right.
CIA
managed as like these covert, not necessarily official Marine operations, but sort of like these contractor-driven operations.
Ah, well, yeah, that's
and then the Billy Russo making his fortune creating, a whole military complex with Anvil security. Like, they're the villains, they're the bad guys, and yet that sort of kind of gets washed over in all the specifics of it.
Well, I think isn't it better that way in the sense of not necessarily got washed over, is they presented it and now people can go out and have that conversation. They don't have like the same thing with the weapon debate. Like they don't have to beat you over the head with it. They can just present both sides of the argument and then let you go have your conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as it's sort of the argument made within the show is sort of in essence that the military industrial complex is kind of too big to fail, so to speak. And that, they point out the flaws of it and, certain things that Agent Orange and whomever else did within the context, but so it's still there. They still present it as a problem, but not one that could necessarily be overcome, at least not with one man shooting everyone.
Right. And to your point, I mean, Agent Orange, whose name I keep forgetting, Rollins, I think.
Yeah.
He actually, that was his downfall, in that he basically did feel like he was too big to fail. Like they're basically, he couldn't fail because there'd be too many people to be brought down with him. So he was pretty cocky, and sure of himself to his own flaw, to his own fault.
All right. So before we completely run out of time, too late. Well, John has another can of worms he wants to open.
No, there isn't.
He does keep a lot of them around him at any given time.
Well, I get hungry sometimes. Look, so now actually, not another can of worms, but I had a question for you. In every other one of these Netflix shows, Marvel Netflix shows, we've heard or seen things that tied into the plot of the Avengers and the movies and the MCU. I don't think there was any mention of anything about quote-unquote the event or any time with basically anything else except for Karen Page.
Right. There was very, very siloed and isolated. You're right. There was not even mentions of, like, the attack on the Battle of New York or any of those types of things. It was very...
he didn't even talk about Daredevil at all.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
Why
I was
would he,
surprised.
I mean, I didn't find it that surprising, because why would he bring those things up?
But
I mean,
not necessarily that
we did have one other crossover instance though, besides Karen.
The detective.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Gold star, Zach.
Oh yeah, right.
In that one,
I get a silver star because I don't remember his name.
Right. No one does. Actually,
That's
it's
Sergeant Mahoney.
Yeah, probably Turk was in it too, so there'd probably be 3.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah,
Turk's like the cockroach of these shows. Keeps turning
he
up.
really is. I actually really love his character.
I do too. I love it. But yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, it's just I'm hoping that this was made after they started to split the MCU, and
I mean, that brings up a whole other debate of like where these things are going in general now that with the discussions of Disney creating its own streaming service, and is there a future for these shows on that platform?
Yeah.
Well,
sorry, now I'm depressed.
That's a depressing note. Let's talk about something else.
well, I was going to say it's interesting because I heard one of the reasons Disney was talking about buying Fox wasn't to get the X-Men back home, even though that's what everyone wants. It was so they could have more adult programming to put on their streaming service, because they were afraid they didn't have enough non-kid or family-friendly stuff to attract a large enough viewing audience.
Well, that explains the sex scene.
It could be.
Could be. Yeah.
So
I'd like to think that was responding to my personal request that I sent in via mail 45 times. I don't know, maybe, but
well,
if there's any way we can get one request, more of Jigsaw's ass.
Because that thing ain't cut up. God, I immediately regret that. That was, yeah. We can edit that, right?
Those cheeks are unblemished.
I think you just named the episode. No.
Yeah.
What?
Jigsaw's rosy cheeks.
Jigsaw's rosy cheeks.
Yes.
All right. So, let's not beat a dead horse anymore.
That's Castle.
So let's wrap up. Let's go around the room, give our final thoughts and a rating from 1 to 10 capes. Even though the Punisher doesn't wear a cape.
Clips.
And we'll start with our former resident beard, Ben.
Okay. Final thoughts. I mean, I definitely went into this with a different set of expectations than I have with any of the other Netflix shows, and I was not surprised or disappointed on that front. It just definitely was not. There was no superheroics. There was no bending of reality, so to speak. It was all very human and very gritty and bloody, which is exactly what I thought it would be. So it delivered on that front. There were definitely some story arcs that, as we discussed, I didn't know where they were going to go or whether they were important, but I liked how everything came together. So all in all, I enjoyed it. I got out of it what I expected to get out of it, and it was a fun show. I wouldn't say it was the best of these Netflix shows, but it's definitely, a way better than Iron Fist. So I would have to give this, I'm going to give it out of 10, I would give it maybe a solid 6.5 to 7 clips.
Okay. All right, Zach.
Well, I think I've actually amended my opinion of it over the course of this conversation a little bit. Going back and reflecting on the other shows, I think 3 of the Marvel Netflix shows, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and this one, addressed a substantive issue and did it really well. I think Jessica Jones did the best. And I think what would put this one over Luke Cage, in my opinion, is just I think the acting and the writing was a little bit better. I don't want to say that it was bad in Luke Cage because it certainly wasn't, but I thought, like I said in the beginning, that the acting in this particular show was the best among all of the Marvel Netflix shows. There were really the only issues I had were pretty nitpicky throughout. So I've amended my opinion to lift it to like the number 2 spot in all of the Marvel Netflix shows to this point. So I really liked it. I would give it an 8.5-ish, I think. That seems reasonable. I guess it depends on what the scale is, and if Jessica Jones marks a 10, which I don't think it does, then this one would certainly be higher. But yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's very, very good. It was really well done in many ways, and the acting was superb throughout. So yeah, 8.5 sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, Mr. O'Grady.
Okay. So yeah, I think what made this whole thing was the inner dialogue of Frank going through all of this emotional stuff as he's also getting beat to hell and just trying to survive and save people and whatever. So that, the attention to detail, the not so twisty bad guy at the end, and some of the other characters like bringing in Karen Page and all that. I liked this a lot. And I think you could basically watch this without having to know about the rest of the MCU as well. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave that for other people to decide. But I think I'm going to give this a solid, and I'll go with clips because whatever. Because I can't think of anything funnier. I'll go with 8 clips, solid, and it's well worth watching. It's definitely not near the worst of the bunch, but then again, Iron Fist sets a very low bar.
Oh, before you move on to Dave, a minor little Easter egg that they had in the show. Remember Lewis's dad kept rewatching that old fight on
Yeah.
So that was the Muhammad Ali Foreman fight, right? That took place in 1974. Which was the same year Frank Castle made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man.
Yes.
Huh.
Nice.
Subtle.
Quite.
Yes.
Overly subtle.
Another little Easter egg, when they steal the cars, and he beats the one guy up and smashes him into the pinball machine.
Yeah.
That's actually a homage to, I believe, a cover image that was done by John Romita Jr. when he was on The Punisher.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, and the only reason I know that is I have the Marvel Selects Punisher action figure, and it comes with a guy smashed in the pinball machine like that.
I've seen that action figure. Yeah.
All
That's
right.
not gruesome at all.
I agree with like everything you guys said. The substantive issue thing is like, I really like it because I like the way the shows handle them. Like I said, they don't preach at you one way or the other. They kind of just present the whole thing and like let you have the conversation. That being said, it's not, and we obviously it's the Punisher. It shouldn't be, but it's definitely not family friendly.
Oh no!
I would recommend
Yes.
anyone who's listened this far in the show
Do not watch this with your kids.
and hasn't watched it yet. Yes, if you have kids, do not watch this with your kids around. And I mean,
If
even
you are a
like,
kid, don't watch this, period. And you probably shouldn't be listening to this show right now.
No, you gotta tell them to watch it, because if you tell them don't watch it, it's inappropriate. You know they're gonna go search
Oh,
it
it's
out.
the reverse psychology angle there.
Yeah,
Boring, kids. So,
it's boring. Yes.
Yeah, go smoke weed instead.
lots of grown-ups talking about their feelings.
Talking about they're knitting doilies. Trust me, it's not pretty.
send your emails to Zach at.
.com.
We're gonna get messages on that one.
You're welcome.
That being said, yeah, again, probably one of the best acted of the series. Solid all the way through. I did have to just look away a few times at some of the more brutal scenes, I guess, because I don't watch enough Game of Thrones. So I'm gonna give it 7.5 Punisher skulls. See, you guys want
Skulls
clips.
works. Skulls, it works.
See, it should have
But
done
they did this. But they did in the opening credits. They had the skull made of guns.
Oh, that's true.
8.5 flak jackets.
So
Doesn't
yeah.
roll off.
I think this, it's a good solid show. Everyone should give it a watch. And yeah, we're gonna put a pin in it there. You guys have anything you want to add? Zach, you have anything you want to plug?
No, yeah, sure, fine. I'm writing for a website called ranker.com if you guys want to come check out my quote unquote total nerd writing. And it hurt. I don't like plugging things, but I just did it. So
I do enjoy reading it every once in a while.
oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I enjoy arguing with your rankings and how wrong they are.
Yeah, I definitely upvote and downvote things just because I have my own opinion.
As you should. I'm
Exactly.
wrong more
That's the
often than
point.
not.
But
All right. How about you, Ben? You have anything to plug?
plug? No. I mean, if someone wants to offer me a job, sure, I'm up for some things. But no, I've got nothing, relative to what people are interested in to really promote right now.
You don't want to tell people about your new puppy? I mean, come on.
I do have a new puppy. This is true.
There you go.
Nice. What kind?
It's a beagle mix. We stick with the hound family. Our first dog is a coon-hound mix, and she'll be 2 this year, next week, and her name is Hound Solo. Our new dog that we just got on Sunday, we had a name picked out, but then at the end my wife vetoed it before we could use it. The name was Chewbacca, but that got shut down. So we actually this dog actually got the name I had wanted for our first dog, which was River.
Oh, okay.
Is that a reference to something?
That's
Dr.
a
Who.
double.
It's a double
Okay.
reference. It's a reference to River Song from Doctor Who, and it's also a reference to River Tam from Firefly.
Oh, the double. That's nice.
See, I just thought of River Song, so. See? So we all have something to plug.
She is not as strong as mine. That's why.
There is also a river prominently featured in my book, The Heir of Olympus and the Forest Realm. So if you'd like
Very
to...
nice. Very nice.
I'm sorry.
I
Last one.
applaud you on that. That was perfect.
And don't
Thank
forget
you.
to check out our website, superheroespeak.com, where we have comic book reviews put up every week by our own Matt Vroom.
This is true. You know what, Dave? One thing that's true of all of those rivers, not one of them wears a cape.
I
missed
missed this so much.
Yeah.
So on that note, boys and girls, thanks for listening, and as always, don't let your cape get caught in the door. Have a good week.